The contract that should have cost Tate Technologies $2.8 million ended up costing $5.6 million. And honestly, I saw it coming from the moment Gerald Hutchinson decided I wasn't aggressive enough for the job. The irony wasn't lost on me, 27 years old, master's degree in supply chain management, fluent in 3 languages, and apparently too soft to handle a straightforward vendor negotiation. He negotiates harder than you, Gerald had said, gesturing toward his golden boy, Bryce Kellerman, with that trademark smug expression that made his jowls quiver. Bryce stood beside Gerald's mahogany desk wearing his lucky navy tie, the one he claimed had sealed his last 3 deals, and a smile that suggested Christmas morning had arrived early. I'd spent 3 months cultivating the relationship with Apex Solutions, understanding their pricing structure, mapping out their decision-makers, learning that their CEO collected vintage military memorabilia and their procurement director had served 2 tours in Afghanistan. But apparently, subtlety wasn't what this deal needed. I walked away. Literally. Turned on my heel and left Gerald's corner office without another word. The Tate Technologies headquarters buzzed with its usual controlled chaos that Tuesday morning. Coffee machines gurgled in break rooms while junior analysts hunched over spreadsheets, their screen glows painting tired faces blue. Someone had burned microwave popcorn on the 15th floor again. The acrid smell drifted through the ventilation system like a corporate offering to the productivity gods. The procurement department occupied the 17th floor, a maze of cubicles and conference rooms where million-dollar decisions masqueraded as routine paperwork. Gerald ruled this kingdom from his glass-walled office, a man who mistook volume for authority and assumed every vendor could be bullied into submission. 23 years at Tate had taught him that suppliers always folded under pressure. He'd never encountered someone who didn't. Bryce represented everything Gerald admired in a negotiator: loud, persistent, armed with an MBA and zero understanding of vendor psychology. The kind of person who viewed every business relationship as a zero-sum game requiring a winner and a loser. I settled back into my cubicle, watching the drama unfold through the transparent walls. Bryce stormed into conference rooms, jabbed fingers at documents, raised his voice until people in neighboring offices glanced over with concern. Classic intimidation tactics that worked beautifully on weak suppliers. The thing about Apex Solutions, which I'd learned during those 3 months of careful relationship building, was their unique corporate culture. Founded by former military contractors, they operated under a strict code. Respect earned respect, but disrespect triggered immediate escalation to punitive pricing structures. Their standard contract included what they called difficulty clauses, legal provisions that doubled rates when clients became, in their polite corporate terminology, challenging to service. I discovered this during a casual lunch with their junior associate, Timothy Chen, who'd mentioned it while complaining about a particularly obnoxious client from Kansas City. Most companies never triggered these clauses because most negotiators understood the delicate dance of procurement relationships. Bryce wasn't most negotiators. Day 1 of his takeover, I heard him through the conference room walls: "This pricing is completely unacceptable. We're a major client, you should be grateful for our business." His voice carried that particular blend of entitlement and inexperience that made seasoned vendors exchange knowing glances. I made myself a coffee, the good stuff from the executive break room, not the swill they provided for general staff, and waited. Day 2 brought threats of competitive bidding. Plenty of other vendors would kill for this contract, Bryce announced during a speakerphone call that echoed across the entire floor. Through the glass walls, I watched Apex's senior negotiator, Maria Santos, visibly recoil from whatever Bryce had just said. I updated my resume, adding my recent certification in international procurement standards, and waited. Day 3 featured ultimatums. "Take it or leave it" became Bryce's catchphrase, delivered with the kind of theatrical authority that impressed Gerald watching from his office doorway. I cleaned out my desk drawers and waited. The 4th day arrived with Gerald's thunderous voice booming across the procurement floor: "Rita, get in here now." He stood behind his desk, face crimson, veins bulging at his temples. A contract lay scattered across his usually pristine workspace, pages of legal text highlighted in alarming yellow markers. His prized Mont Blanc pen lay abandoned beside his coffee mug, which bore the inscription "World's Greatest Negotiator," a gag gift from last year's holiday party that had become unironically precious to him. "Why," he demanded, spittle flying, "did the contract double in cost?" I glanced at the papers. Apex Solutions letterhead. Multiple addendums. The difficulty clauses triggered in sequence like dominoes falling. Beautiful, predictable, completely avoidable dominoes. Did you read section 12.7 of their standard terms? I asked mildly. Gerald's crimson deepened to purple. What the hell is section 12.7? Behavioral adjustment pricing. It activates when client representatives become, quote, unprofessionally aggressive or dismissive toward Apex personnel. First offense doubles material costs. Second offense doubles labor. Third offense triggers contract renegotiation at premium rates. The silence stretched long enough for the air conditioning to cycle on. You knew about this? Gerald's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. I flagged it in my initial contract review. The memo dated March 15th. Subject line, Vendor Relationship Management Critical Success Factors. More silence. Gerald's eyes darted to his computer screen, fingers stabbing at the keyboard with the hunt and peck technique of someone who'd started his career before email existed. The memo materialized, 3 pages of detailed analysis highlighting Apex's unique corporate culture, their military background, their zero-tolerance policy for disrespectful behavior. Recommended approach, I continued, reading over his shoulder, maintain professional courtesy at all times. Acknowledge their expertise. Frame cost discussions as collaborative problem-solving rather than adversarial negotiation. Gerald scrolled down to the recommendations section. Every point highlighted exactly what Bryce had done wrong. Every warning ignored. Bryce said this was corporate nonsense, Gerald muttered. Bryce cost you $2.8 million. The number hung in the air like incense. Gerald stared at the screen, his empire of intimidation crumbling around him. 23 years of successful bullying hadn't prepared him for vendors who bullied back. Can we fix this? He asked, the smugness finally drained from his voice. I considered the question. Apex Solutions had already triggered all 3 difficulty clauses. The contract was locked at premium rates. But they'd also included a clause I hadn't mentioned yet, a professional courtesy provision that reset pricing when clients demonstrated meaningful commitment to collaborative partnership. Potentially, I said. But it requires a very specific approach. Gerald's desperation was palpable. The quarterly review loomed in 6 days. A cost overrun this substantial would attract board attention, and Gerald's performance reviews were already shaky after last year's procurement scandals. Do it, he said. Whatever it takes. I spent the afternoon crafting what I privately called the humility gambit. A formal letter acknowledging Tate Technologies' communication missteps, expressing genuine appreciation for Apex's patience, and requesting a reset meeting with their senior partnership team. The letter went through 7 drafts, each version more carefully calibrated than the last. The key was specificity. Not generic corporate apologies, but detailed recognition of exactly where we'd gone wrong. I outlined each incident, took full responsibility for inadequate preparation of our negotiation team, and proposed a structured relationship management protocol going forward. The letter also requested something crucial, a face-to-face meeting with Apex's founder, Colonel Patricia Steele. Gerald read the draft 3 times. This makes us look weak, he complained. This makes us look professional, I corrected. Weak is paying double rates for 3 years because we're too proud to admit mistakes. He signed it. Colonel Steele's response arrived within 2 hours. A brief, military-precise email agreeing to meet at Apex's headquarters. Time, Friday morning. Duration, 1 hour. Attendees, minimal. Friday morning meant I had 36 hours to prepare Gerald for the most important meeting of his career. A meeting that would either salvage the contract or cement Tate's reputation as the client nobody wanted to service. Remember, I coached him Thursday afternoon. Patricia Steele founded this company after retiring from military procurement. She's seen every negotiation tactic ever invented. Authenticity is your only weapon here. Gerald nodded nervously. The swagger had completely evaporated, replaced by the genuine humility that desperation sometimes produces. Friday arrived gray and drizzling, the kind of Chicago weather that made even optimists question their life choices. Apex Solutions occupied a converted warehouse in the industrial district, brick walls, steel beams, no-nonsense architecture that reflected their corporate philosophy. The parking lot was immaculate, with military precision in the way every vehicle aligned perfectly between painted lines. Patricia Steele met us in their conference room, a woman whose bearing suggested she'd once commanded significantly more than vendor contracts. Her handshake was firm, her eye contact unwavering, her gray suit pressed with creases sharp enough to cut paper. Behind her, the conference room wall displayed commendations from various military units and a photograph of her younger self in dress uniform receiving some kind of medal. "Gentlemen," she began, then noticed me. "And lady. Thank you for coming." Gerald launched into the prepared apology, hitting every point we'd rehearsed. He acknowledged the disrespectful behavior, accepted responsibility for inadequate team preparation, expressed genuine regret for wasting Apex's time and patience. Colonel Steele listened without interruption, her expression revealing nothing. When Gerald finished, silence filled the room like morning fog. "Your subordinate," she finally said, nodding toward Bryce's absent chair, "called my project manager an idiot. He questioned our military service record. He threatened to damage our reputation in the industry." Gerald winced. "I understand your response was completely justified. Mr. Hutchinson," Colonel Steele leaned forward slightly, "in 30 years of procurement, I've encountered every type of client. The desperate ones who promise anything. The angry ones who threaten lawsuits. The manipulative ones who play vendors against each other." She paused, studying Gerald's face. "What I rarely encounter are clients who actually acknowledge their mistakes and take concrete steps to prevent repetition." The hope in Gerald's eyes was almost painful to watch. "Your contract analyst," Colonel Steele continued, glancing at me, "sent a comprehensive relationship management protocol along with your apology. It demonstrates understanding of partnership dynamics that most Fortune 500 companies never achieve." I'd spent 2 sleepless nights crafting that protocol. Detailed procedures for vendor communication, escalation procedures for disputes, regular relationship health checks, mutual feedback mechanisms. Everything needed to prevent future disasters. "If Tate Technologies is genuinely committed to implementing these procedures," Colonel Steele said, "Apex Solutions is prepared to reset your contract to original pricing." Gerald's relief was visible. "Absolutely. Whatever protocols you recommend." "One condition," Colonel Steele added. "Ms. Dominic manages all Apex-related communication going forward. No exceptions." Gerald glanced at me, calculating quickly. Giving me control meant admitting his golden boy had failed spectacularly. It meant acknowledging that quiet competence sometimes trumped aggressive posturing. "Done," he said. The handshakes were firm. The revised contract arrived Monday morning, pricing restored to original levels, relationship protocols formally incorporated as contract addendums. Bryce quietly transferred to a different department. Gerald never quite regained his swagger, but he learned something valuable about vendor relationships that his 23 years of intimidation hadn't taught him. Sometimes the people you underestimate are the ones holding the keys to your success. The real education began immediately after Colonel Steele's handshake. Walking back to our rental car through Apex's parking lot, Gerald was practically vibrating with nervous energy, like a man who'd just defused a bomb and couldn't quite believe he still had all his fingers. "How did you know?" he asked as we climbed into the sedan. "About the reset clause?" I buckled my seatbelt deliberately slowly, watching him squirm. 3 months of careful research had uncovered that provision buried in subsection 15.3 of Apex's partnership agreements. Most clients never triggered it because most clients never needed it. "Due diligence," I said finally. Something Bryce might have discovered if he'd spent less time practicing his intimidation face in the bathroom mirror. Gerald's laugh came out strangled. We drove back to Tate in relative silence, both processing what had just happened. He'd nearly destroyed a multi-million-dollar relationship through sheer arrogance, then been saved by the employee he'd dismissed as not aggressive enough. Monday morning brought the revised contract, but also something more interesting, an internal email from Gerald to the entire procurement department announcing enhanced vendor relationship protocols effective immediately. The memo carefully avoided mentioning Bryce's spectacular failure, instead framing the changes as proactive improvements to our partnership management approach. Corporate face-saving at its finest. The protocols themselves were comprehensive. I'd spent the weekend expanding my original proposal into a 47-page manual covering everything from initial vendor contact procedures to dispute resolution mechanisms. Every section included specific language requirements, escalation trees, and relationship health metrics. Most importantly, it included the Rita rule, though Gerald insisted on calling it the Senior Analyst Oversight Provision. Any contract worth more than $500,000 required sign-off from a designated relationship specialist before negotiations could commence. Guess who became Tate's first designated relationship specialist? The promotion came with a modest salary bump and a significantly better office, still not the glass-walled kingdom Gerald inhabited, but no longer a cubicle where every phone conversation became public entertainment. The new space featured actual walls, a door that closed, and a window overlooking the city's financial district. From that window, I could see Meridian Bank's headquarters, where Bryce had interviewed the previous week. Word traveled fast in procurement circles. His departure from Tate hadn't been entirely voluntary, and his reputation had preceded him to every subsequent interview. Vendors talk to each other. They share stories about difficult clients, warning each other about negotiators who make their lives miserable. Bryce's name now appeared on several informal blacklists circulating through the industry. Meanwhile, my relationship with Apex deepened into something approaching genuine partnership. Colonel Steele introduced me to her extended network, other veteran-owned businesses that shared her commitment to professional relationships over adversarial posturing. Within 3 months, I negotiated favorable contracts with 6 new vendors, each deal smoother than the last. The secret wasn't complicated: treat people like human beings rather than obstacles to overcome. Gerald began attending my vendor meetings, ostensibly to provide executive oversight but actually to learn techniques that 23 years of bullying hadn't taught him. He watched me navigate pricing discussions with collaborative language, frame cost concerns as shared problems requiring joint solutions, acknowledge vendor expertise rather than dismissing it. "You make it look easy," he observed after a particularly successful negotiation with Quantum Logistics. "Because it is easy," I replied, "when you remember that vendors want successful partnerships too. They're not trying to cheat us, they're trying to deliver value while maintaining profitable margins. Our job is finding the intersection where both objectives align." Gerald nodded thoughtfully, taking notes in a leather portfolio that hadn't existed during his Bryce-worshipping phase. The transformation was remarkable, if slightly unsettling. Watching a career bully discover empathy resembled watching a shark learn vegetarianism. The quarterly review arrived with unprecedented fanfare. Our procurement department's performance metrics had improved across every category, cost savings increased by 12%, vendor satisfaction scores reached all-time highs, and contract dispute incidents dropped to 0. Tate's board of directors took notice. The boardroom on the 42nd floor intimidated most employees, with its mahogany table long enough to host international peace negotiations and windows offering panoramic views of the city skyline. I'd never been invited to board presentations before, but Gerald insisted my attendance was essential for context. Chairman Harold Fitzpatrick presided over the meeting with the gravitas of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected thousands of employees and millions in revenue. His steel-gray hair and penetrating stare had reduced grown executives to stammering apologies, but he smiled warmly when Gerald introduced me as our procurement relationship specialist. "Ms. Dominic," Fitzpatrick said, consulting notes written in precise handwriting, "your vendor relationship innovations have produced remarkable results. Walk us through your methodology." The presentation I'd prepared emphasized systematic relationship management over traditional adversarial negotiation. I explained how understanding vendor psychology led to better outcomes for both parties, how collaborative problem-solving reduced long-term costs, how treating suppliers as partners rather than adversaries created competitive advantages. The board asked intelligent questions. CFO Margaret O'Sullivan wanted specific cost analysis data. Operations Director Frank Martinez inquired about scalability across different vendor categories. Legal counsel Diana Hoffman probed contract language modifications. I answered each question with detailed examples, citing specific negotiations where relationship-focused approaches had yielded superior results compared to traditional intimidation tactics. The Apex situation became a case study in how quickly vendor relationships could deteriorate, and how systematically they could be repaired. "Impressive work," Fitzpatrick concluded. "Gerald, I assume you're planning to expand this approach across all vendor relationships?" Gerald beamed like a proud parent claiming credit for his child's straight-A report card. "Absolutely, Chairman Fitzpatrick. RITA's protocols will become standard practice throughout our procurement operations." The meeting concluded with handshakes and congratulations. As we waited for the elevator, Gerald couldn't contain his excitement. "Did you see their faces?" he whispered. 12% cost savings. 0 dispute incidents. They're going to approve budget increases for the entire department. The elevator arrived, empty except for us. As we descended toward the 17th floor, Gerald's expression grew more serious. Rita, he said quietly, I owe you an apology. A real one, not the corporate variety I delivered to Colonel Steele. I studied his reflection in the polished elevator doors. The smugness had permanently disappeared, replaced by something resembling humility. You were right about Bryce, he continued. About aggressive negotiation. About vendor relationships. About everything, really. I let my ego override my judgment, and it nearly cost us millions. The elevator dinged softly, doors opening onto our familiar corridor of cubicles and conference rooms. Gerald, I said, stepping out, the important thing is that you learned from it. Most managers would have blamed the vendor, blamed market conditions, blamed everyone except themselves. He nodded thoughtfully. 23 years of intimidation tactics don't disappear overnight, but I'm trying to unlearn some bad habits. The effort was visible. Gerald's interactions with other vendors became noticeably more respectful, his negotiation style shifting from confrontational to consultative. He still made mistakes, old habits died hard, but he caught himself more quickly, apologized more readily, asked for guidance more often. The transformation affected the entire department. Junior analysts who'd previously cowered during Gerald's explosive meetings began contributing ideas, sharing insights, proposing creative solutions to complex procurement challenges. The atmosphere shifted from fear-based compliance to collaborative problem-solving. 6 months after the Apex crisis, our procurement team received industry recognition at the National Vendor Relations Conference. The award ceremony took place in Chicago, featuring over 800 procurement professionals from companies nationwide. Colonel Steele delivered the keynote address, discussing the evolution of vendor-client relationships in modern business environments. Her speech included a case study about a major technology company that had successfully transformed its procurement culture through systematic relationship management. She never mentioned Tate by name, but everyone in our industry knew the story by then. The company that had nearly destroyed a major vendor relationship through arrogance, then rebuilt it through humility and systematic change. During the reception following her speech, Colonel Steele approached our table with a genuine smile. Ms. Dominic, she said, extending her hand, I want to personally thank you for what you've accomplished. The relationship management protocols you developed have become a model for other companies in our network. The recognition felt surreal. 18 months earlier, I'd been sitting in a cubicle watching Bryce destroy relationships through sheer incompetence. Now industry leaders were citing my work as best practice exemplars. Gerald practically glowed with reflected pride, accepting congratulations from colleagues who remembered him as the executive whose negotiation team had triggered Apex's penalty clauses. His transformation from corporate bully to relationship advocate had become almost as famous as the original debacle. You know what the best part is? Gerald confided during our flight back home. I actually enjoy my job now. Vendor meetings used to be battles I had to win. Now they're puzzles we solve together. The philosophical shift ran deeper than technique. Gerald had discovered something that 23 years of adversarial relationships had never taught him: collaboration was more satisfying than domination, partnership more sustainable than conquest. Back at Tate, our success attracted attention from other departments. Marketing wanted to understand how we'd achieved such high vendor satisfaction scores. Operations inquired about applying relationship management principles to internal team dynamics. Human resources requested consultation on employee engagement strategies. The Rita rule expanded beyond vendor contracts to become company-wide policy. Any significant business relationship, whether with suppliers, clients, or internal stakeholders, now required relationship specialist oversight before negotiations could proceed. My office grew again, this time to accommodate a small conference table and additional filing cabinets for the documentation systems that had become central to our success. The window still overlooked the financial district, but now I could also see construction cranes building the new Apex Solutions headquarters, a gleaming tower that their partnership successes had funded. Colonel Steele sent a handwritten note when they broke ground, thanking Tate for being the client that reminded us why we love working with true professionals. The note included an invitation to the building's dedication ceremony, scheduled for the following spring. The ceremony would mark exactly 2 years since Bryce's spectacular failure had nearly destroyed everything I'd spent months building. 2 years since Gerald's smugness had cost us millions. 2 years since I'd walked away from his office and waited for consequences to unfold. Sometimes the most important victories are the ones that look like defeats in the beginning. Sometimes walking away is the strongest negotiation tactic available. Sometimes the person everyone underestimates turns out to be holding all the cards that matter. Gerald never quite regained his swagger, but he found something better: competence rooted in genuine respect for the people across the table. The procurement department he now leads bears little resemblance to the intimidation-based operation he once commanded, and the results speak louder than any aggressive posturing ever could. 6 months later, Apex Solutions nominated Tate Technologies for their annual Partnership Excellence Award. The ceremony featured a brief speech from Colonel Steele praising our commitment to collaborative professionalism and systematic relationship management. Gerald accepted the award, credited our procurement team's innovative approach to vendor partnerships, and somehow managed not to mention that his innovative approach had nearly cost us $3 million. But every time he walks past my office now, he nods. A small gesture that acknowledges what we both learned: in procurement, as in war, the best victories often belong to those who know when not to fight.